hot dogs, Armour hot dogs. What kind of kids eat Armour hot dogs?
Fat kids, skinny kids, kids who climb on rocks, tough kids, sissy kids.
Even kids with chicken pox love hot dogs, Armour hot dogs.
Hot dog kids love to fight.
Juicy, tender, and delicious. Kids around the nation were enjoying Armour's hot dogs, bacon, and ham at an even lower price than before. Philip Danforth Armour, a salesman that learned the secret to American business. Railroads stretched across the nation, and Chicago was in the center of that web. With the Civil War, the demand for meat was increasing, and Armour saw an opportunity in the meat business. The stockyards opened on December 25th of 1865. This was where Armour created his meat packing facility and called it Packing Town. Soon, Chicago would become the center of the meat distribution system. A hotel for animals, a sea of pens covering an area of over 300 acres on the south side of Chicago. Inside the buildings, they had a disassembly line for animals. On a farm, it'd take anywhere from 4 to 8 hours to butcher a cow, but here, it only took 30 minutes. Armour wanted efficiency and profit, and to get that, he used every part of the animal. As Swift stated, "We use everything but the squeal." To cut costs further, he employed desperate immigrants to complete the dangerous and repetitive tasks. Working conditions, of course, were dangerous and unsanitary. Walls were covered in blood. There were few toilets and very few sinks. Cows would be killed with a single blow by a sledgehammer, then be hung by their feet as they were cut into pieces. Armour would soon have a close rival as well, Gustavus Swift, a butcher from Massachusetts. Seeing how well Armour was doing in his meat business, he followed closely behind him. To improve efficiency, Swift created refrigerated train cars. They were so effective that even Armour copied him. However, railroad companies refused to use their refrigerated cars as they would profit more from transporting live animals. To get around this, Swift and Armour used the Grand Trunk Railway, who gladly accepted business with them. After seeing the amount of business they lost, the American railways agreed to use the refrigerated cars. Swift, Armour, and other big meat businesses rapidly grew across the East Coast, and it affected local butchers. If a butcher didn't agree to sell their processed meat, they were threatened with bankruptcy. They even began opening their own stores and driving down prices to kill the local butchers. Those local butchers were pressured, and slaughterhouses across the nation began to close. To meet the growing demand for their product, the Beef Trust began searching westward. Further west, there were open fields and lots of grass, perfect for cows, but also for bison. To the big businesses of America, the bison and the Native American population were an obstacle in their path. So to them, the only logical solution was to remove them both, and the farmers began to use that land to farm cattle. Workers in Packing Town never knew if they'd be working 8 or 16 hours on any given day. Work wasn't guaranteed, which was why they took any opportunity they could get to work. Even if the cattle hadn't arrived, the workers were required to stay for the cattle to be delivered. On May 1st, 1886, workers throughout the country walked out demanding an 8-hour day. It was a success. Armour and others agreed to the 8-hour workday. However, that success was short-lived, as 3 days later, on May 4th, packing companies returned it to 10 hours. Armour argued that he raised the hours to compete with rival meatpacking businesses. News of the dominance of Chicago meat on local butchers slowly spread to the capital. Some even suspected that Armour, Swift, and the other meat packers were setting prices together to dominate the market. And they weren't wrong. During a committee meeting, Armour admitted to setting prices with other meat packers, but argued that it was for the American people. Chicago's meat packing industry was ever growing. However, working conditions still hadn't improved. About a fourth of Chicago's population relied on the meat packing industry. Many of these workers lived in the slums near the packing town, nicknamed Back of the Yards. To the west was a garbage dump, and to the north was a small canal filled with so much animal blood and waste from the packing houses, it started to bubble with methane and hydrosulfide gases, nicknamed Bubbly Creek. However, there was still hope for the Back of the Yards, the angel of the stockyard. That's what Mary McDowell was called. She was a progressive who felt the immigrants of the slums needed help. After lots of campaigning, she was able to close the nearby garbage dump, and after 30 years, for the cleanup of Bubbly Creek. To show support for his workers, Armour started the Armour Mission, an institution for kids to learn new skills vital for the new high-tech world. This was one way Armour made himself look better to the public. January 6, 1901, Armour would die at the age of 68. Swift would die 2 years later, and their sons would inherit their father's businesses. The biggest challenge was dealing with the constant investigation, news, and the law. The Progressive era extended from the 1890s to the 1920s. Progressives fought against a wide range of things, like big barons, political machines, Jim Crow laws, alcohol, women's suffrage, and so much more. They all agreed that in order to get real change in society, they needed serious government intervention. In 1904, a young reporter for a socialist newspaper appeared in Chicago's stockyards. His name was Upton Sinclair. He investigated the sanitation of the packing houses and the daily lives of the workers. He could be called an investigative journalist. They usually put themselves at risk to expose injustices for the public. Sinclair wanted to write something that would bring the people together to overthrow the current industrial system. He went undercover into the packing houses. There would be meat stored in great piles in rooms, and the water from leaky roofs would drip onto it, and thousands of rats would race about on it. Sinclair writes in his book, The Jungle. The story follows an immigrant Lithuanian family trying to survive life in packing town. The book is based on true events and stories that Sinclair experienced while in packing town. Stories of fingers getting cut off and mixed into the sausage, rotten meat being dunked in chemicals and repackaged, rat feces being scooped in with the meat, or distracting inspectors to pass on tubercular cows. When the book was released in 1906, it was an immediate hit. However, his book has a different effect than he had originally intended. He famously says, "I aim for the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach." He wanted to improve working conditions for the packers. Reading of the horrors, Theodore Roosevelt was determined to bust the trusts that were behind all of this. Thinking that rules and regulations would solve the issue and regain the public's trust, he passed the Pure Food and Drug Act and the Meat Inspection Act. The Pure Food and Drug Act prohibited the mislabeling of food and medicine and required labels with major ingredients. And the Meat Inspection Act ensured sanitary conditions for slaughterhouses and required federal inspections of meat products. Roosevelt labeled Sinclair as a muckraker, and it wasn't a compliment. However, they took pride in that label as they shined a light on corruption in hopes that the public would push for change. Just like how Uncle Tom's Cabin revealed the brutal lives of enslaved Black Americans, The Jungle revealed the truths of the meatpacking industry for the public to see. Though this left a mark on the beef trust, it didn't address what the workers, ranchers, and butchers were going through. During another investigation, the Beef Trust agreed to sign the Packers and Stockyards Act of 1921. This forced Armour, Swift, and other meat packers to focus only on the meatpacking business. This was the beginning of the end for the beef trusts. Soon, demand for meat would drop after World War II, and Armour and Swift would shut down their Chicago operations by the 1960s. July 30th, 1971, all of Packingtown was closed for good. Today, we use the same slaughtering practices they did over 50 years ago.